Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel-Rubel, and this is One-on-One, Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Welcome back to Matan's One-on-One podcast. Each week we spend 30 minutes speaking about a seminal figure or idea on that week's Parsha. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Rabbanit Shira Marili Mirvis, the Rabbanit of Keilat Shirat Tamar, to speak about the commentator, the ha-Chaim, and what he has to say on our parasha. Shira, it's great to have you here.
Shalom. Great to be here.
So let's hear a little bit about the ha-Chaim, where he was from, what his approach was in life to Torah.
So Harav Chaim Ibn Attar, who is named after his Saba, who taught him Torah when he was young. He was born in 1696 in Morocco, in a place called Salah. It's a little village. And he is a son of a family of Rabbanim. So from the moment that he was born, he was learning Torah with his Abba and with his Saba. And he was meant to be a rabbi ever since from a young age. He grew up to be one of the greatest Parshanei Torah. Like he wrote his main commentaries on the Torah, and it's called ha-Chaim, and that's how he got his nickname. He's named after his book. His book name is ha-Chaim, but he also wrote a commentary on Gemara. He wrote Chefetz Hashem, which is about the Gemara on different Masachtot, and Pri Toar, which is halachic book commentary on Shulchan Aruch according to the four different phases of Shulchan Aruch. Obviously, ha-Chaim, which is his main work about the Torah, commentary on Torah, and more questions and answers of halacha and igrot, meaning
different letters he wrote.
Different letters, and I would say like laws of community laws of how to behave in his community and in Bichlal, when he was well known in Morocco, and then in all of the countries, or Islamic countries, that received his letters and received his halacha. He didn't have easy life, I would assume, like everyone during that age. It wasn't an easy age to grow up in.
When you read about you read about all the different commentators, and here I'll give a little plug for a book by Avigal Rak, which is right now exists only in Hebrew, but it's in the middle of being translated to English, called Parshanei HaMikra, different biblical commentators. But you read about the lives of all these commentators, and I mean, I just wonder how they're able to still be prolific in their writing while under such suffering, whether they're refugees or all their family dies or all their children die. And it's an unbelievable thing that they were still able to, put out their life's work while they were living lives that were in varying length and were full of a lot of suffering.
I think it's not only that it's related, but it's depending on one another. Meaning, I think Torah was their anchor in life. That was their love. That was their passion. And when everything was going wrong around them, they were sitting and writing their Torah and thinking of chidushim and how to write the commentary that they have on Torah ve'Gemara ve'Halacha, and I think that's what kept them going.
Really interesting.
That's how I see it. That was their passion in life.
So what happened in his life? What were his trials and tribulations?
So the regular thing, famine, and there was the rulers of Morocco that didn't like the Jews and did like the Jews. Every couple of years it was different. So he had to walk around, like he had to go to exile a couple of times. He went out to from Salah, he went to Fez, and then he came back to Salah, and then he went to Italy because he wanted his book to be published. And then he was able, because in Morocco, because of the Islamic law, there weren't any printers, so they weren't allowed to print anything. So ha-Chaim HaKadosh, he did crowdfunding and he went to Italy to publish his books, and then he was able to send it around the world. And then he went back to his community in Salah, and then he decided to go to Israel because it was very hard in Morocco. There was no food, there was no money, there was no work. And his father-in-law, who was supporting him and his family, passed away. And then he had no money to support his family anymore. And he decided to take his 2 wives and
I read
kids.
that he didn't have children with the first, so he also
had children.
He didn't have girls with the first. Really?
Ken. So they had girls, and after 10 years of having only girls, he married the second wife. They lived all together. I know for us, through our eyes, our modern eyes today, it sounds like I could never imagine such a reality. But I think it was custom. It wasn't such a big deal.
It was something that existed.
So it existed, but it wasn't something that they encouraged.
Right.
Like you had to have a good reason, for example, not having sons. And also more than 10 years. You need to give it
it was a minimum. There was
a minimum. So he and both of his wife and their kids, he had already sons from his second wife, and they all came to Israel at the age of 43. And then 4 years later, he passed away. And he's buried together with his wife, with the second wife. He's buried in Har HaZeitim. It's easy to find his grave tomb, his kever, because it's colored in blue. So it's mamash, you can see it.
That's because of his connection to Kabbalah?
That's because of his connection to Kabbalah. And his Talmidim and his followers colored his tomb in blue.
Right. So for those listening, imagine why in Tzfat, for example, you have a lot of blue painted arches. That color, which is why is that associated with Kabbalah?
Because Tchelet dome לים, ים דומה לרקיע, והרקיע הוא דומה לכיסא הכבוד.
Right, the midrash that connects the color of blue to
blue
to God's
is resembling
throne.
the ocean is resembling the color of the sky, and the sky is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sitting, and that's why blue is like the connection in between heaven and earth. And that's why you have a lot of things that you can find in blue. So we started saying that he wrote his commentary according to Kabbalah. But I think one of the things that he became famous for is his drashot. He used to give a lot of shiurim and divrei Torah in shul throughout the week and during Shabbatot. And to those drashot at the beginning, it was just his immediate community. But later on in the years, it became to be something well known. And I actually found a research saying that even the woman used to come. And think about it, we're talking about the 17th century.
Oh, yeah.
And in Morocco. And they had a special room. There's a description of a special room for the woman that they'll be able to hear the divrei Torah of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. I think the most interesting thing about Or HaChaim HaKadosh is to try and understand his connection to the Baal Shem Tov. If we look at the line of Chassidut, so we have a Baal Shem Tov, and we have a Ari HaKadosh, and we have Tzfat, and how come Or HaChaim HaKadosh, who's Bichlal from the other side of the world, from Morocco, and has nothing to do with the Jews in Russia and in Poland, how are they connected? So there's a lot of stories about how are they connected. The one that I think about the most is the one that is just saying that they had a chavruta, a Baal Shem Tov in Russia, in wherever he was, in Ukraine, and Or HaChaim HaKadosh, who was sitting in Morocco, and they had a chavruta in the Shamaim, and a Baal Shem Tov is saying that Or HaChaim HaKadosh, he told his students that they should go and find the commentary on Torah of Or HaChaim HaKadosh, because Or HaChaim learned his Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when Baal Shem Tov is telling his student that he's going up Be'aliyot Neshama to learn Torah in heavens, this is where he meets Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and they learn together. So I think it's interesting to try and understand.
And we think that they're connected because some ideas of the Baal Shem Tov are expressed in the Or HaChaim's commentary. Meaning, what's our thought to connect the two of them?
Because a Baal Shem Tov told his students to go and find Or HaChaim books and learn them, and Or HaChaim told his students to go and search for the Torah of a Baal Shem Tov and to learn it. Wow. That there's a great light in the Torah of a Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov said the same thing to his students without having emails in between them two. And there's a story that is well known that one Shabbat, Baal Shem Tov was washing his hands before the meal, and then he turned around to his students and he said, Kaba Or Ma'aravi.
Yeah.
Which is in English,
the Western light has been dimmed.
And then the students didn't understand, and Baal Shem Tov explained that every generation there's one person who understands the true kavana of Netilat Yadayim. And during their generation it was Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And suddenly during that Shabbat, Baal Shem Tov washed his hand, did Netilat Yadayim, and all of a sudden he understood Netilat Yadayim. He understood the kavanot, the kabbalic kavanot of Netilat Yadayim. And then because he understood it, he also understood that
the person who had held it before was no longer around.
Exactly. And the kavanah came to him. So Motzei Shabbat, they wrote letters, and then the story is actually in research is to the same Shabbat that Or HaChaim actually passed away. So there was some sort of unexplained connection between a Baal Shem Tov and Or HaChaim. There is a lot of research trying to say that they've met in Israel when Or HaChaim came to visit, and a Baal Shem Tov in one of his journey was in Israel, and maybe they have met and maybe they have learned together. But I don't know. I don't have any historic, accurate research to say that it truly happened. So I'm not sure if they met in heaven, if they met in Israel, if they haven't met at all.
It's not something so wild. Meaning many of us know, you could take a story of twins, but there are many people who report that they feel very, energetically connected to somebody else. And they can feel when something happens, or they can feel, when somebody passed away. That's something that again, it's not something you hear every day, but you walk through life, you hear that. It happens. It doesn't sound to me wild at all. The connection seems incredibly deep. Especially if they were able to learn Torah from each other.
because it goes to the students, meaning the students of Or HaChaim HaKadosh are learning Baal Shem Tov, and the student of Baal Shem Tov, I remember it hit me when I went to Uman to daven, to Rabbi Nachman, and at the entrance to the grave of Rabbi Nachman, you have pictures of rabbi, so you would have pictures, there's no picture of Baal Shem Tov, obviously, but there's pictures of Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Natan, and all the lines of Chassidut, and all of a sudden there's a picture of the Ben Ish Chai. And I walk in the street, walking to Rabbi Nachman, and I'm like, what's the Ben Ish Chai have to do with Rabbi Nachman Mibreslev? It's mamash not connected.
Wrong region. Yeah.
Wrong region, wrong person, wrong language, everything. And then because Ben Ish Chai is the student of Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and because Baal Shem Tov appreciated Or HaChaim HaKadosh, it went down the line. And though the students of the Baal Shem Tov are learning Ben Ish Chai, they're learning Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and it's all masorot of interpreting Torah through Kabbalah. Now, I don't learn Kabbalah. I don't understand Kabbalah. I don't learn Kabbalah. I don't know it. But learning Or HaChaim HaKadosh, it gives me an option to pick, or to take a closer taste, or to take a closer look at something that I don't know and I don't understand, and I understand that I don't understand. But it gives me some taste to it.
It's okay, by the way, because on another podcast we have a discussion with someone who teaches us Kabbalah on the podcast. So we're all.
But she's an expert in Kabbalah.
She is an expert.
So I'm just trying to say I'm not an expert in Kabbalah, and I know that I'm not. But I think what's interesting is that Or HaChaim was adopted by the Rebbe Mitzans, and he is mentioned, like his commentaries are mentioned and quoted in different books that are in the lines of Chassidut, and I find it very interesting. And they said, even if you don't know Kabbalah, and even if you don't understand Kabbalah, have the books of Or HaChaim in your house, just like as something that will guard the house. Just like Kabbali people will have Zohar in their house because it guards the house, so have Or HaChaim in your house, even if you don't understand it. So like putting meaning to just having the books around, or meaning to the interpretation of Torah of Or HaChaim, gives them some sort of powers, some sort of
protection. What's also so interesting is when someone is able to be successful and speak to the generation of his time. And we have people, let's say like Rabbi Nachman, who was not overly popular in his lifetime. Okay.
It took a few years.
For all different reasons, there were different waves in which his Torah, became more popular, of course, today, because everything has become very individualized. So his very individualized view of Avodat Hashem is also one of the many reasons why his Torah has become so popular among people who are far flung from the world of Chassidut. But it's always something I find really special when someone in their lifetime, right? Because Or HaChaim was loved in his lifetime as well. He's also loved today, but there's something that's extra sweet when somebody is able to be loved. And we have that interesting dichotomy with all kinds of art forms, right? Whether someone is a singer or they're
like, do you recognize their genius?
Their genius,
they are,
right? Are people able to see it in their time, or is it something that speaks to people later because of all different changes that happen? I think about it in a very in a very different realm, but I think about, let's say, the success of Hanan Ben Ari, for example, as a singer.
How amazing it is for him.
He's in a moment in time where he is so energetically relevant to people, all different levels of society. It doesn't matter their religious background. There's something about the combination, the treasure of his sound, his words, and the genuine kavanah, the genuine intention behind his singing that is able to capture people. And it's right now. He's speaking right now to his people. So I'm just sharing that thought because it always fascinates me. Who's able, and much of it is beyond their ability to explain. I mean, the Or HaChaim was a shiluv. He was some sort of combination of Kabbalah and Chassidut, and also halakha, and able to be relatable to the people. Okay. That it was some sort of magical.
So I don't see it as magical. I think there's also magical maybe, but I'm very rationalist in my life. But I think there's two reasons for it. I think first of all, Or HaChaim put in a lot of effort in order to people know his Torah. And the first effort was giving a lot of drashot and making sure that a lot of people, first in Morocco, they'll be exposed to his learning Torah, to his way of learning Torah, to his way of learning halakha. His nickname is Ma'ayan ve'oker harim.
He's a spring, and he also uproots mountains.
Uproot mountain, because he takes the sugya in Gemara and he puts it all by itself, like he will isolate the sugya and focus in the sugya, just in those specific, like take it into little parts, take it into parts, and then interpretates it. So he had a different way of learning that was different in Morocco at that time. And he felt the need to expose people to that way of learning, because he thought that that's the depth that can come from learning in that way. And the second thing I think, and that's something that I ask myself a lot, how come people don't know the rabbis that were in Morocco? And the huge Torah that was in, not only in Morocco, but in Tunis, in Algeria, in Iraq. We're not familiar, stam, in Israeli schools. You don't learn about any of the Sephardi rabbis. They're not even hardly mentioned.
I live in Yerucham. My kids learned a lot about them, but it depends where you're living.
That's amazing, but I think also that's only in the last years. So I think the second reason, besides for Or HaChaim giving drashot, and I think it was important for him to show his way of learning. I think the second reason is that there was no printers, like we said, in those Islamic countries, because they thought it contradicts the Quran. It's a whole different reason. But because they weren't able to print their books and to send them away to different countries like they did in Ashkenazic countries, they were able to print them and to send them out to different countries, to Israel, to Islamic countries. So I know in Islamic countries, they were reading the Torah of the rabbis from Ashkenaz, but the people from Morocco weren't able to send their Torah to outside countries. So Or HaChaim, by taking the journey to travel to Italy in the 1700 and fundraising the journey and the printers, that was enabled him to send out his Torah, and that's why he was known already during his life. But I think it was important for him. That's why he took that effort to do that.
That's so interesting.
Ken.
Wow. Okay. There's so many other questions we could ask, and I'm so curious. And you're just whetting my appetite, and I hope everybody else is to read more about the Or HaChaim. But I think we'll take a turn and we'll look a little bit about what he has to say on this week's parasha, to bring some of that to our weekend, to our Shabbat table.
So Parashat Mishpatim, we have so many little details, and I think that in order to, what I try to do is I try to focus each year on a different theme or pasuk that I like, and I thought to talk about the mitzvah of gerim,
which is often translated as converts, but it's an inappropriate translation when it comes to the Torah. It means an outsider.
An outsider.
An alien is the official term. An alien who is someone who is not indigenous to the local culture.
And he's coming in to your community, and he's got that label that he's from the outside and he doesn't really familiar with all the little ways of how to behave or how to speak or the language or the culture of that community. And the pasuk would say in Perek Kafbet, "Veger lo tone velo tilchatzeno, ki gerim haytem be'eretz Mitzrayim." So Rashi and Ramban and Ibn Ezra, they're all talking about how we're not allowed to take advantage of them, of them not being familiar with the culture of that community.
If you want one example of that, by the way, just think back to the story of Sodom. The story of Sodom is our best, earliest example in Torah of what we would call xenophobia, of being utterly scared of the outsider. A lot of times we look at that story and think it's about sodomy or about sexual misconduct, but it's not. The crux of the story is really about being unable to accept somebody from the outside. So that's an extreme, horrible example of how a ger can be treated, but it's one of the first examples that Torah gives us. It's already in the 19th chapter in Sefer Bereshit.
So Or HaChaim is saying very beautifully, first of all, he going over the Rashi and Ramban and Ibn Ezra, but he is saying, the fact that the pasuk is saying, "Ki gerim haytem be'eretz Mitzrayim," it's not just only so that you would remember or you have the notion of what it's like to be an outsider, but it's also so that you wouldn't feel yourself like, oh, I'm part of Am Yisrael and I'm part of the community and he's not. And therefore I'm allowed or not to treat him as someone who is part of my community. So Or HaChaim is saying, "Ki gerim haytem be'eretz Mitzrayim," you have done the same process. Like your souls and the outsider soul is coming from the same place. Don't see yourself as in the hierarchy you're higher than him, because your soul is coming from a deeper place, for you belong to Am Yisrael and he doesn't belong to Am Yisrael.
Right. It's part of like this paradox, because we're the chosen people, or we're God's nation. And here I'm being inspired, I believe, by Rav Sachs. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember anymore what I've read in his amazing words and what's already been inculcated. But he says something to the effect of, it's very easy to become conceited, right? Or we could think that we're higher than everybody else because we were chosen by God. But the Torah reminds us, tens of times to remember that we also experience that life of being the outsider, but don't think that just because I chose you that means that you're better than somebody else. Meaning, don't take that chosenness and use it as a ticket to take advantage of other people.
I think one of the things that I understood that mamash blew my mind when I read Rav Sachs about the chosen people, that he said, you're chosen to do something. It's not that you are the chosen people, but you are chosen to do something. Yeah. And then what is your responsibility as someone that they have a role in the world? And you can say also that other nations have other roles. Yeah. Like each person, and as an individual, I was born with some advantages and disadvantages, and what is my role in the world? And as the same thing you can say as a nation. We as a nation were chosen to do something in the world, and what is our responsibility? So Or HaChaim HaKadosh is saying that in order to be this Am Sgula, in order to be those chosen nation, we had to be Gerim first. We had to be the outsider, and we had to go through the process of, he says, lekalef et haklipot, like to peel our souls and to take out all the external things that caused us to be the outsider until we were able to be Am Yisrael. And then when you look at the stranger or the outsider, when you look at the ger, remember that you had to go through the same process, and there's no meaning to it that your neshama is higher than his neshama.
Two thoughts in response. One is that it really just reminds me, and I want us to all put this piece together, that Moshe goes through this process first. Okay, when he calls his son Gershom, ki ger hayiti be'eretz nochriya, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu finds it utterly important that our leader go through that process before we go through that process, right? Moshe has to run away. He has to go to Midian to then come back. And he's able to relate to us because he himself was an outsider. If he had just grown up in the palace, then he just would have been this privileged young man. And then that wouldn't have been a relating point between us and Moshe. So Moshe, and with that etymology of ger hayiti be'eretz nochriya, that he goes through it, he becomes sort of the emblematic ger who is able to come back, be chosen for a job to do something, and then move forward, just like we do later. That's one thought that's just coming to mind.
So it's like a spiral. Moshe had to do it. We as a nation have to do it. And now today we have the responsibility to do it towards everyone who's coming in.
100%. Another thing I want to say is also to connect us back to the ha-Chaim's kabbalistic roots is that when he speaks about the klipot, okay, that's a kabbalistic term, right? So we can, I don't really always know what it means, but we can try it. It definitely connects to all, certainly the midrashim that speak about the fact that we were also in a very low place in Mitzrayim, right? Most of the midrashim look at us as having been full of tum'ah. There are a few that speak about dafka a different perspective, but I think he's referring to those ideas.
Yes, we were there at the low bottom, and we had to do a job. We had to go through some sort of a journey in order to be able to receive Torah, in order to be able to go into Israel, and in order to be the people that were chosen to do something in the world. And the Gerim has to do some sort of the same process. But he doesn't stop there. And when the parasha is talking about almana v'yatom, mamash in the few psukim later on, kol almana v'yatom lo ta'anum.
Can't afflict any widow or any orphan.
אם ענה תענה אותו, כי אם יצעוק יצעק אליי, שמוע אשמע צעקתו.
Because if you afflict them, and then they cry to me, I will hear their cry. Okay, meaning it's very clear who is the guilty party in this situation.
And also you would see that it's so beautiful. It's ענה תענה, צעוק יצעק, שמוע אשמע, everything is
a coupling. There's a coupling.
And our Chaim is asking, why do we need to say אותו? אם ענה תענה, if you'll torture... In English, you have to say him, but in Hebrew, you don't have to say.
Right. There is no. I think it's called a definite particle. There is no definite particle in the rest of the sentence. So why do we need it at all?
Yes, because it's obvious that we're talking about the widow and the orphan. And then Or Chaim is saying, because you need to understand that if you're doing it to the orphan, to the widow, to someone else, it will come back to you. It's like a boomerang. It's oto, but it's actually you. And you have to understand that your action will have an influence not only on the people that you are mistreating, but it will have eventually in some godly way, which I don't know, but in Hashem calculation, it will come back to you. And this is the word oto. Like, how do you see how your action influence you in your life? So, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is Or Chaim interpretation to mitzvat tzedakah, charity. That Or Chaim, I think he sees it, I don't know, when I read Parashat Mishpatim, I see a theme. And I think the theme of justice and charity and how do you treat the people that are less fortunate than you is kind of the theme with it, that Or Chaim is following in this parasha. And Or Chaim is saying the importance of mitzvat tzedakah, the importance of giving charity, it's because it doesn't belong to you. Meaning, if you have money, good for you, and use it for whatever you need. But if you have more money than what you actually need, and that's also already a question, is how much do I need? But if you have more money than what you need, that means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you more. And the question is, what do you do with that more? So obviously you can need more, meaning you can have more needs, and then you will spend it on you, on your family. But Or Chaim is saying the mitzvah of tzedakah, the charity, is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you more, it's because you are the line to give out to other people. It doesn't really belong to you. You're just the tzino. You're just the...
Right, you're the channel through which it's
exactly.
It's
you're the channel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give it through you. And it belongs to other people. It's not really yours. And I think the way of looking at the world and looking at Bichlal in the culture that we live in today, that like Shlomo will keep asking me, what do you want? And I keep on saying, the question is, what do I need? And I think it's something that we live in the world that we want all the time. And I definitely want a lot of things, but the question is that we need to be to balance it a bit more. I think in our culture is, what do we need? And then what do we do with things that we don't need? And what do we do when we have more than we need? And to who it belongs, and to have that knowledge or toda'ah that we actually, it's not ours, meaning Hashem is using us in order to spread those things in the world. So what is our responsibility, or what is our obligation towards things that we don't need and we still have them? And how are we in charge of the people in our community, or to balance it a bit better, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving through us?
I think also what comes through in the ideas that you've shared in the past few minutes is the sort of moral education that the old Chaim is trying to give to people who might, in their situation, think that they could be better than others. Okay, meaning I think that the Torah is obviously getting to that point, but both through the comment about the ger and also the comment here about tzedakah, it's this comment of, you could think that you are in a higher place, but let's just make sure that we alter our consciousness to realize that we're not really supposed to be there, that we're supposed to remember that we were chosen to do something, right? Or that we were given this money perhaps, but it's in order to supply what we need and also to help others for what they need. It's sort of this like constant leveling of society. And so the Psukim speak about it by reminding us that we were destitute of Mitzrayim. And the Chaim, I feel like, is sort of trying to mold the consciousness of people who could be the haves and to remind them that you have in order to also enable other people to have as well.
I think it's like putting on glasses and looking at reality and looking at your mitziut through the notion that HaKadosh Baruch Hu owns everything in the world, in us, in the nation. And then if you look at through the glasses that will have you see the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu mending everything in the reality, then you see that you have a role and you have obligation and you have responsibility. And with great power comes great responsibility. And this is, I think, what Or HaChaim is trying to say here. What is your responsibility? Social responsibility.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel-Rubel, and this is One-on-One Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Thank you to the entire Matan team for their input. Please do One-on-One and Women's Torah Learning a small favor by sharing this podcast with family and friends so that we can reach new listeners. You can stream and download these episodes on Spotify, iTunes, and Matan's website, and write us any feedback at podcast@matan.org.il. That's podcast@matan.org.il. Thanks for listening, everyone.